TrueStory Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot. Today, TrueStory Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Ironwood, Montana, is the kind of place you reach by a winding two-lane highway, the tires of your car humming along as towering pines blur past on either side. In autumn, mist drifts through the valleys like drifting ghosts, and the horizon glows gold as the sun sets early behind the jagged peaks of the Rockies. Small wooden storefronts line Main Street, each painted in rustic hues of ochre, forest green, or barn red, while patches of snow cling stubbornly to shaded areas. The air carries the crisp tang of pine resin and the distant whistle of a freight train, reminding everyone that Ironwood, though quiet, is connected to the world beyond these mountains. At the northern edge of town, atop a gentle hill dotted with aspen groves, stands the Palmer homestead, a three-generation ranch family's proud legacy. A low-slung log cabin with a slate roof sits beside a row of weathered barns and corrals. To the untrained eye, the property might seem unassuming, just another patch of agricultural land in rural Montana. But for the Palmers, it's home. A place where the scent of hay bales mixes with the aroma of home-cooked stew, where every weather-worn plank and stone tells a story of long winters endured and summers of hard work. 26-year-old Rowan Palmer arrived in Ironwood a little over 2 years ago after landing a job as a public relations specialist at St. Jude Regional Hospital. Before that, she had spent her 20s in Helena, studying health communications at the University of Montana. Tall and lean, with chestnut brown hair often pulled into a loose braid and hazel eyes that convey both warmth and determination, Rowan is precisely the kind of woman small-town neighbors admired: smart, capable, yet never above lending a hand. She instantly fell in love with Ironwood's tight-knit community, its slow pace of life, and most of all, with the man whose family had farmed these rolling fields for generations. That man is Beckett Palmer, now 29 years old, with broad shoulders and an easy, boyish grin that melts hearts. Beckett left Montana State University with a business degree, but his real passion drew him home, taking over the family's small-town insurance office from his retiring cousin. In doing so, he earns respect from local ranchers who dislike paperwork and families seeking guidance on life insurance. He is, on the surface, everything you'd want in a Montana husband: a steady provider, a familiar face at the Ironwood Community Center, and a willing partner for late-night bonfires by the river. Their courtship was swift: a single charity auction, a shared cup of black coffee at Pine and Hearth, and long walks through the Golden Meadows. Less than 2 years later, they were married in a rustic ceremony at Cedar Grove Chapel, yellow leaves fluttering as guests tossed birch bark confetti. Now, as autumn cooled into early winter, Rowan and Beckett welcomed their first child, a daughter named Piper, into the world, tugging their shared dreams in a direction neither really anticipated. Piper Palmer, 3 months old, is a sprite of laughter and midnight cries. Rowan's days and nights revolve around her, swaddling the baby in a pastel-pink fleece blanket, soothing her to sleep with a lullaby in a voice still raw from childbirth. Beckett, on his part, in between negotiating policies and scheduling risk assessments, finds every free moment to peer into the nursery, smiling as if nothing could ever be more precious than the tiny head of dark hair rising and falling with each breath. Yet beneath this pastoral idyll, cracks already begin to form. Over at the farmhouse, Beckett's mother, Eloise Palmer, sits in her favorite armchair by the stone fireplace. At 54, Eloise retains the classic look of an Ironwood matriarch. Silver-streaked hair pulled back into a tight bun, clear blue eyes that sharpen at the slightest sign of impropriety, and a posture so straight it would shame younger folk. She helped raise Beckett after his father passed away years ago, and she believes deeply in traditional values: brace yourself for work, respect the land, and trust nothing that smacks of modern nonsense. So when Rowan gently closed the front door at 11 o'clock one November evening, making sure the latch clicked softly so as not to wake baby Piper, Eloise was already waiting. "Rowan," Eloise said, her voice both sweet and unrelenting. "I can hear that girl crying from over here. And I can also say your trouble won't end until that child goes to bed without that blasted air conditioner sucking all the heat out of this house." Rowan froze for a moment, her heart pounding, then turned to face her mother-in-law in the dim lamplight. She smoothed a lock of hair behind her ear and offered a polite, if tired, smile. "Yes, Mrs.
Palmer."
"I know. It's a bit chilly elsewhere, but Piper was fussy. She needs to be comfortable to sleep." Eloise's eyes narrowed. "I raised 4 sons without an air conditioner. The Lakota woman who lived here before me tied her babies into bundles on a bare floor, and they all did fine. That machine is a luxury, one I do not allow after sundown." Rowan swallowed. She wanted to protest, to explain that modern medicine recommended a stable temperature for newborns and that she'd read dozens of studies about sudden infant death syndrome. Instead, she forced herself to stay calm. "I understand, but trust me, Piper's temperature needs to stay at just the right level. If she gets too warm, she can overheat." "Overheat?" Eloise interrupted, almost with a snort. "Child can't overheat in early November in Montana. The wind is already slicing across Yarrow Ridge." And so, long after midnight, Rowan sat in the rocking chair, swaying Piper in her arms, singing a lullaby she learned from her mother, humming a quiet rebellion against Eloise's outdated beliefs. Draped in her faded quilt, the boyhood blanket Beckett carried to university, Rowan made sure the heater clicked on low in the hallway, an invisible line of defense while Eloise stared from the doorway, arms crossed and lips pinched. It is this fundamental clash, traditional versus modern, superstition versus medical science, that sets the stage for the Palmers' unfolding drama. At the heart of it all paces Rowan forward. Her 6-week leave is nearly up. She has an important PR campaign building for St. Jude Regional's new mobile clinic. She knows she cannot delay returning to work indefinitely. Beckett, meanwhile, is overseeing his largest contract of the year with a sheep ranch up near Gunnison Pass. And from behind both of them, Eloise's disapproval quietly, relentlessly, hones in on Rowan's every move, ready to unravel everything one misstep at a time. By day, Ironwood's quiet streets embody a picturesque small town. School buses bumping along sidewalks, white-clad nurses tucking into the diner's pancakes, ranchers idling in weathered pickup trucks. But at night, after the lamppost gaslights have ignited and the last call for hot cocoa echoes down the road, whispers slip into boarded-up windows. "Did you hear how many times that baby screamed last night? Mrs. Palmer will do whatever it takes to keep that thing alive, but the Lord put tradition above all else." Sloane Rivers, 24, the new receptionist at Ironwood Branch Insurance, slips into town after dark, her presence largely unnoticed by Magnus Technologies, save for the few who saw her lean back Harley parked near the clinic entrance. She's a city transplant from Bozeman, wearing dark jeans, a leather jacket, and a look that hints she knows more about Ironwood's secrets than she lets on. When Rowan first met her at a staff orientation, something about Sloane's measured smile and unwavering gaze left cohesion in the air. At that moment, Rowan chalked it up to friendly professionalism, but she would soon discover a more tangled truth. So, this is Ironwood, Montana, a place of jagged mountain beauty, of community potlucks and Sunday church services, of dusty roads at dawn and neon signs flickering at midnight. In a town where everyone knows your grandparents' names and how long your dog's been in heat. Keeping the peace can require delicate maneuvering, especially when new life arrives under a roof where tradition is a law unto itself. And hidden under every floorboard are expectations and judgments waiting to pinch at a young mother's heart. As the leaves turn from gold to copper and the snow begins to land in the dark of night, the Palmer homestead stands poised on the cusp of its biggest reckoning. Will Rowan and Piper carve out a secure new life, or will the chasm between past and future yawn ever wider? In the months ahead, iron wills will be tested, alliances formed and broken, and truths revealed in a town that isn't used to secrets staying buried for long. But for now, as the wind sighs through the spruce trees and the headlights fade across the meadow, Ironwood waits, quiet, expectant, and ready, while Rowan settles Piper into a fleece-lined bassinet, hoping tomorrow brings enough sunshine, warmth, and common sense to keep their fragile peace intact. The night air in Ironwood had a hush that felt heavier than usual, as though the pines themselves held their breath. Rowan Palmer lay in the guest bedroom behind the homestead's main house, the soft hum of the space heater her only companion. A thin sliver of moonlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating the slanted ceiling and the pastel-pink bassinet cradled beside her bed. 30 minutes ago, she had finally decided, against her exhaustion, to resume breastfeeding her 3-month-old daughter, Piper, whose cheeks were flushed and wiry footsteps of frustration had awakened her once more. Beckett had been gone for hours, attending to the Agnew Sheep Ranch's insurance review up near Gunnison Pass. Rowdy weather had delayed his return, but that didn't change how lonely or vulnerable Rowan felt. She smoothed a stray lock of her chestnut-brown hair. When Piper's wailing finally subsided, she slid from the bed onto the gleaming hardwood floor, feeling each footstep anchor her as she scooped up the baby. Wrapped in chunky knit blankets, Piper's small face would have looked serene if not for the stubborn furrows on her brow. Rowan settled into the rocking chair, the same one she'd used through much of her pregnancy. The wicker creaked softly under her weight. She brushed a fingertip across Piper's forehead, crooning the lullaby her mother had taught her. Stay awake, my heart's delight. Until the morning light, the baby's chubby hands fisted the fabric of Rowan's flannel shirt. Slowly, Piper's sobs dwindled to snuffles, then to yawns. By the time she latched on, her fingertips were tracing tiny arcs across Rowan's collarbone, searching for reassurance rather than nourishment. Just as Rowan was beginning to relax, feeling the baby's weight shift against her torso, she sensed movement in the hallway. The bedroom door creaked open, casting a bar of lamplight across the carpet. Her heart fluttered. "Mrs. Palmer?" she asked, her voice barely louder than a whisper. At Ironwood distances, echoes traveled effortlessly. Eloise Palmer emerged, deliberately propped against the door jamb. Even in the dim light, her silhouette was unmistakable. Tall, angular, with that tightly coiled bun perched high at the back of her head. She wore her favorite cardigan, the one embroidered with tiny golden pine cones and sturdy wool socks, as though she were ready for any mountain chill. Her lips were pursed, her arms crossed over her chest. "Rowan," Eloise began, her tone deceptively calm. "Why is that child screaming still? It's nearly midnight. My hearing's not what it used to be, but I swear I can hear every wail all the way from the living room. If you're not going to do your job, I'll be forced to discipline that baby myself." Rowan forced herself not to flinch. She carefully disengaged Piper from her chest and cradled her gently, so as not to wake her fully. "Mrs. Palmer, she's just upset. I'm giving her a feeding. If she doesn't have the right temperature, she can't sleep soundly." Eloise flicked her gaze to the deadbolt, then back to Rowan's face. "Don't give me that medical mumbo-jumbo. I was judged the best mother in Ironwood Township for 30 years, and I didn't need any fancy advice. That air conditioner is off at 11 o'clock sharp. End of discussion." "For the last time," Rowan said, trying to keep the quiver out of her voice, "I need the room at 80 degrees. If she's too hot or too cold, she'll wake again in 20 minutes. A consistent environment is important for her." "Important," Eloise interrupted, taking a step inside the room. "Don't patronize me. I've buried 2 sons and lost a husband. I know exactly what makes a child well. If you can't handle it, I'll relieve you. Go sleep in the living room." She planted one gloved hand on her hip, as though daring Rowan to contradict. Rowan's breath caught. "Mrs. Palmer, you're my mother-in-law, and I respect that. But I am her mother. I've read the guidelines from St. Jude Regional. There's a reason we have central heat. Babies can't regulate their own temperature." Eloise's jaw tightened. St. Jude Regional, old church group. Back in my day, nobody needed a thermostat. Saplings learn to bend in the wind, just like kids learn to cry through it. You won't keep me from turning that thing off. A tense silence hovered in the room. Piper, sensing the shifting emotion, made a small fuss, offering a short wail before settling her head back onto Rowan's breast. Tears pricked at the corners of Rowan's eyes as she swallowed, fighting frustration. "I'm not trying to disrespect you," she said, "but if you force me to turn off the air conditioner, Piper will rouse again shortly. You'll be right back here, I promise." Eloise scanned the nursery. Its gentle nursery blue walls dotted with tiny white stars. A single snowflake drifted past the window, reminding them of the ice storm predicted in 2 days. She took a breath, her shoulders momentarily relaxing. "When I was raising your husband," she said, her voice low but firm, "we couldn't touch the thermostat after I tucked you-know-who into her crib at bedtime. You'll find a way. That's how families survive, by doing what's expected, not what's trendy." She pivoted on her heel and stalked out of the room, the door clicking shut behind her. Rowan exhaled hard, rocking Piper a little more gently now. She hummed the lullaby again. "Stay awake, my heart's delight, until the morning light." Piper's fists relaxed. Her breathing slowed. A quiet contentment settled around them for maybe a minute, long enough for Rowan to believe she could slip back to bed. But as she lay Piper down in the bassinet, still warm, still drowsy, the low tumble of the heater cut off, Eloise's victory was complete. Rowan climbed back to her pillow, slowly tracing circles on Piper's blanket, determined to keep the baby swaddled in layers that would hold in what little heat remained. Sleep came in stolen bits, a limb dropping, a half-dream that involved windstorms and crying children. By the time she heard Beckett's pickup pull up around 1 a.m., Rowan had been half-awake for hours. Beckett padded through the kitchen in his work boots, his breath forming a mist as he rang the oil lamp in the hallway. "Rowan," he whispered. The soft creak of their wall shared a lump in Rowan's chest. "Beck." She sat up on the narrow trunk at the foot of the bed. "Are you home?" He ducked under the doorway, rubbing snow from his fleece-lined jacket. "Just got back. Sorry I'm late. Agnew Ranch got a sudden call, so I had to crunch numbers in the pickup until 10:30. His gaze shifted to the empty spot where Piper was supposed to be. He realized the nursery door was open, the hallway light on. "Is she?" He paused, sipping cold air. "Is that furnace on?" Rowan shook her head tiredly. "Mom shut it off. Said I don't need the AC. And all babies survive fine on quilts and old-fashioned tough love." Beckett winced, heading inside the bedroom. He switched on the nursery lamp. "Rowan, she's not durable like a grown man. It's nearly 40 degrees in here." He squarely eyed the thermostat. Its dial was pegged at off. "Mom's going to freeze us both." "She's going to freeze Piper," Rowan said, her eyelids heavy. She joined him near the thermostat, reaching to turn it back on. Beckett grabbed her wrist. "Are you crazy? Mom will see it." "She'd see it anyway," Rowan shot back. Then she turned to face him, blowing a stray lock from her forehead. "Beck, I'm only trying to protect Piper. I can't keep rocking her like that or wearing out this mattress." Beckett frowned, tugging her into a hug, so she sank onto his chest. "Rowan, I will talk to her tomorrow. I promise. Just let me handle it. Right now, let's get you both warm." He nudged her toward the bed. The lingering smell of peppermint chapstick and cedarwood soap followed him. "Cover Piper first. Then me. Then yourself." Rowan cradled Piper and scarfed a flannel sheet over her. Beckett squeezed her shoulder. "I'll go get fresh blankets from the mudroom right now." When he stepped out, Rowan lay in the single bed, stretching her arms above her head to borrow what warmth remained radiating from Beckett's last hug. The old quilt, so well worn it was softer than velvet, was still tucked around her legs. And now, as the furnace roared back, the room's temperature climbed. Piper's lips parted in sleep, her chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Rowan gazed at her daughter, a strong, quiet resolve settling in. For all the nights she would spend awake, rocking, planning when to return to Helena for a PR campaign, or how to juggle St. Jude Regional's mobile clinic rollout, this, Rowan decided, was the most important work she would ever do. She would choose modern science over superstition, and she would protect this baby girl with every ounce of strength inside her. Morning would eventually drift in, pale light creeping past the curtains, but for now, beneath the low purr of the heater, Rowan allowed herself a moment of rare, unguarded gratitude. The first night was the hardest. Every night that followed could only become easier, as long as she refused to give in to that unyielding, old world voice that insisted babies belonged on bare floors in winter. She smiled in the dark, softly kissing Piper's tuft of hair. "Sleep tight, my heart's delight," she whispered. And in that hush, the only sound was the slow rattle of wooden shutters, the steady tick of the wall clock, and a newborn slumber, peaceful, protected, and finally warm. The following morning in Ironwood was a brittle, ice-tinged sort of dawn. Long before sunrise, the sky already shifting from indigo to a pale, frosty blue. A light dusting of snow covered the yard, crisp and white, reflecting the first rays of daylight. Inside the Palmer homestead, the air felt sharp, despite the furnace humming in the background. Rowan rose on tiptoe, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby in the bassinet. Piper lay swaddled in layers of flannel and fleece, tiny fists curled to her chest, eyelashes fluttering with the remnants of dreams. Rowan cracked open the nursery door and peered into the hallway. A thin sliver of light came from the living room's lamp, revealing a surprised silhouette. Eloise Palmer perched on the arm of a worn armchair, a steaming mug of coffee clasped between her hands. When she saw Rowan, Eloise slipped into silence, as though each footstep in the hallway registered as an intrusion into her self-imposed vigil. "Mornin', Mrs. Palmer," Rowan whispered, her voice weary but polite. She adjusted Piper's blanket and hesitated. She knew stepping too far into that room would reopen last night's battle over temperature. Eloise set her mug on the small oak side table, dripping coffee onto a coaster embroidered with tiny pine cones. "Mornin', Rowan. Baby's still sleeping." She nudged a ceramic coaster with her toe. "Heater was running all night, I saw." Her tone blended curiosity and a fragile, grudging concession. Rowan nodded, resisting the urge to pull Piper closer for extra warmth. "I had to keep the room at 68 degrees. She can't regulate her temperature yet. She needs a consistent environment." She highlighted the word consistent, as if it held the power to put Eloise at ease. Eloise's lips pursed. She hinged her gaze on the thermostat near the door, warily noting the number. "Well, I suppose one night of modern convenience won't kill her," she said, though her tone wavered between surrender and judgment. Rowan offered a tired half-smile. "Thank you. I know you're used to bodies toughened by winter winds, not infants." She lifted Piper in her arms. The baby stirred, yawned, and suckled her thumb as though unfazed by ongoing tensions. Eloise's gaze softened for a heartbeat as she studied her first granddaughter. "She's something," she admitted quietly. Then, her voice hardened again. "So, you still plan to take her up to Helena next week?" Rowan sat on the edge of the leather armchair, cradling Piper and steadying herself. She let the baby sleep for a moment before speaking. "Yes. The clinic in Helena is the only place that stocks the pediatric hepatitis B vaccine. The county health department here, Stanton County, only offers it to infants up to 2 months. I missed that window." Eloise sipped her coffee, the steam curling around her face. "Helena's over an hour in the pickup, and that's if the roads are clear. Good luck getting your way across the pass when there's snow, let alone keeping that poor thing from freezing." Rowan squeezed her daughter's blanket, determined. "I've already checked road conditions. The trip is scheduled for next Wednesday. The forecast calls for clear skies. It's worth it. If she doesn't get that dose before 4 months, there's a gap in her immunity. I can't risk that. Not out here, where the nearest pediatric specialist is in Butte." Eloise studied her granddaughter's face, as though trying to measure the baby's vulnerability. She took a slow breath. "If you insist on going, I'll help. But you're still to keep that thermostat off after 11. Remember that." Rowan's chest tightened as she realized Eloise's concession came with its own restriction. She gently slid Piper back into the bassinet, carefully arranging the blankets around her. "I appreciate your help getting us there," she said softly. "And I'll do my best to manage the temperature. I just need you to understand why it matters." Eloise grunted, a small gesture acknowledging the point. "Fine. But don't come getting me up in the night when she cries if you keep things so tropical." Rowan couldn't help but flash a fleeting grin. "I'll try not to." Once Piper was asleep again, Rowan returned to the kitchen, where the kettle hissed on the stove. She poured a cup of Earl Grey and carried it back to the breakfast nook. The oak drop-leaf table bore the slight marks of decades, the faint ring of a coffee mug here, a scratch from when Beckett's cousin dropped a dishware stack there. As she warmed her hands around the mug, she pondered how to broach the topic of finances with Beckett later. Fuel costs, lodging near Helena, potential appointment delays, figuring out how to gently insert it into conversation without triggering his mother's interference. When Beckett finally shuffled in, sipping a steaming grind-of-the-day coffee, he looked tired but attentively supportive. "Morning," he said, offering Rowan a cupped look. "How's the little squirt?" Rowan passed Piper into his arms. "She slept about an hour straight. We need to stretch that 2 hours by next week, or the trip's going to be painful." Beckett glanced at the thermostat on the wall. "I saw it at 68. You really want to keep it that warm all day." She drew in a breath and tried to soften her tone. "Look, I know it's above what you and Mom are used to, but if her core drops below 65, she'll shiver and get restless. It's not safe." Beckett nodded slowly. "All right. I'll cover the heating bill, but we need to stick to our budget." "Say, how much is a round trip to Helena for 3 people? Gas, toll, lunch." He paused, noticing the tension rising in her shoulders. "Rowan, I'll handle it. You don't have to do this alone." Rowan offered a grateful smile. "Thank you, Beck. I can't skip the trip. The hospital in Helena is the only place where she can get that dose before her 4-month check. The local clinic stock doesn't cover infants beyond 2 months. It's a nationwide shortage. If she waits longer, I'll feel guilty every time she has the sniffles." Beckett set Piper down in her bassinet, smoothing a strand of hair from her petite forehead. "All right," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "We'll go. Let's set up a schedule for her feedings that day, book a motel room near St. Jude's so we don't have to make the drive back at midnight, and be done with it. I trust you've done the research." Rowan knelt by the femme strip of the bassinet, tucking in an extra Sherpa blanket. "I have. I booked a room at the Helena Lodge. It's about a 15-minute cab ride to the clinic. If we decide not to drive, better safe than sorry with winter storms." Beckett rubbed her back before rising to start his morning. "Okay, we'll do it your way." He ruffled her hair and headed downstairs to boot up his laptop to check an email from his CEO. "I'll talk to her, Mom, later, and tell her we're leaving early Wednesday. Do you want me to call her now or after Piper's first feeding?" "After," Rowan said, realizing she needed a buffer. "Give me a few hours." Beckett nodded and slipped from the room. Rowan exhaled a shaky breath. She took a sip of coffee, the warmth radiating through her arms, knowing there was still tension to navigate with Eloise, but at least they had won this small victory. Ironwood's pale morning light had turned a subtle shade of pink. Rowan scooped up a piece of paper from the table, her meticulously organized Helena vaccine checklist, and began double-checking each line. Doctor's office confirmation, motel reservation, cooler for formula, winter coat for Piper, phone charger, emergency contact list. As she lined up the next item, she felt a brief surge of optimism. They were moving forward together, mother, father, and daughter, a trio facing Ironwood's cold, Montana wind, confident that, come next Wednesday, baby Piper would be one step closer to a healthier future. The air felt a hair warmer now, not just from the furnace, but from the idea that no amount of tradition could entirely freeze Rowan's resolve to do what was best for her daughter. Later that same morning, a sharp wind rattled the windows as Avonlea, Rowan's calf-length wool coat, hung empty on its hook. The day's first rays filtered through frost-smeared panes, warming the sun-lit patch on the kitchen floor but doing little to thaw Rowan's anxiety. The coffee table was strewn with color-coded notepads. One outlined the Helena trip itinerary. Another listed Piper's feeding schedule, and a third projected furnace costs for keeping the nursery at 68 degrees. But each sheet seemed fragile in the face of Eloise's unwavering disapproval. Rowan padded into the living room, pale pink slippers brushing the rug. Eloise sat in her customary armchair, an aged recliner whose arms were worn smooth from decades of use, knitting white baby booties. The needles clicked rhythmically. Piper's faint coos drifted down the hallway from the nursery, like a small reminder that life, and parenthood, marched on whether or not peace reigned. "Good morning, Mrs. Palmer," Rowan said, voice measured. She offered the coffee she'd just poured, black, no sugar, on a green ceramic coaster. Every coaster in Ironwood seemed to bear some pinecone motif. Eloise accepted the mug, placing it gingerly on the table. Rowan folded her arms, glancing at the clock. 7:45 a.m. I spoke with Beckett. We're leaving for Helena on Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock, no later. We'll book a cab to St. Jude's. Motel rooms confirmed. Eloise's knitting stilled. She looked up over the rims of her reading glasses, her gaze flat as a sun-baked meadow. Wednesday at 8? You know I wanted to drive with you down Fitzpatrick Pass. I know, but the roads are treacherous in winter, Rowan said evenly. Plus, at 8 a.m., there's less traffic. She tilted her chin, hoping Eloise heard the reasoning, and not just the defiance. Beckett and I agreed it's safest. Eloise's eyes narrowed. She laid aside the half-finished baby sock, its snowy white yarn dangling, and stood to cross her arms. Rowan, that child isn't a fragile porcelain doll. You want to wrap her in bubble wrap all the way to Helena? I'd rather she learn tough love now. Rowan's chest tightened. She forced a slow breath. Piper is a newborn. She needs to build immunity, and that hepatitis B vaccine is only available at St. Jude's right now. If she's even a fraction of a degree off, she'll shiver and wake. You can't compare an adult's metabolism to a baby's. Metabolism, schmetabolism, Eloise scoffed. My boys grew up hunting and skinning deer. They were tougher than nails. You're overthinking everything. Rowan bit her lip, stung by the dismissal. Mrs. Palmer, I appreciate your perspective, but this is my child. I'm not going to risk her health for a matter of pride. Eloise's lips curled upward, half a smile that threatened frostbite. We'll see. But you know I call it as I see it. She picked up her knitting again, tapping a single stitch. Observation and tradition aren't negotiable. Rowan released her shoulders. Shoulders that had been hitching under the weight of last night's cold and tension. She reached for her notepad, thumbs grazing the baby blue paper. I'll make sure to pack enough blankets, she said, voice unsteady. But I need Duncan's She-Plastics heater for the back seat. A firm knock at the front door cut her off. Rowan exchanged a look with Eloise. Beckett's early, she muttered, stepping lightly toward the door. Beckett entered, pulling off his wool cap and shaking loose curls of dark brown hair. His eyes were bright, possibly excited or more likely, simply relieved he could avoid it all by shutting the office door behind him. He spotted both women in the living room. Good morning, he asked, sounding uncertain. Good morning, Rowan repeated, accentuating each word. She motioned for him to sit. But as soon as he lowered himself into the armchair across from Eloise's, a shift occurred. His posture stiffened. Morning, Ma, he said, voice clipped. I just closed on the Mertz agreement, and he trailed off, noticing the tension in the room. When he slid a glance at Rowan, the lines in his forehead deepened. Everything okay? Rowan looked down at the half-knitted booty in Eloise's hands. She felt the old impulse to shrink into herself. We're finalizing details for Helena. Wednesday at 8. Eloise set the knitting aside and fixed Beckett with a steady look. Are you telling her we can't have the heat in the nursery? Because last night, she practically turned it to beach resort. Next thing you know, she'll have that air conditioner on full blast in January. Beckett hesitated. His gaze flicked to Rowan. I told her I'd cover any extra heating costs. We can compromise. Heat until midnight, and then turn it back down to 65. Eloise let out a bark of laughter. Compromise? With a baby? You know what I say about newborns and compromise. She leaned forward. Can't you just tell her to obey? Keep the heat off. Come home when I say, and… Beckett's jaw clenched. Hold on, he turned to Rowan, suddenly gentle in tone. Ro, you know I love you, right? I'll talk to Mom about the thermostat. I know this is important. Rowan's heart fluttered with relief. Thank you. That means a lot. She paused, then asked quietly, can you book a motel with a mini-fridge? I want to pack enough milk and supplies so we're not scrambling. Will do, he said, turning his head to dial his phone. Now that that's settled, I have to finish reviewing our Q4 report. I'll call you later about the breakfast schedule. Rowan nodded and gave a gentle smile as he walked toward the hallway. But when Beckett passed the nursery door, Eloise shot him a look that instantly froze him in his tracks. Son, she said, voice low, you really think your wife knows how to wheel that baby and herself up Fitzpatrick Pass without your mother's company? Beckett's shoulders slumped. He closed his eyes and sighed, opening them slowly as though bracing himself. Mom, she's got it covered. You saw how last night went. We'll be fine. Oh, I saw, Eloise replied dryly, picking up her knitting again. And I don't like it one bit. Beckett glanced back at Rowan, who watched him from the doorway. His expression wavered with guilt as he crossed to the kitchen to retrieve Piper's insulated car seat. Rowan followed, wishing she could touch his arm, but something in the air told her his allegiance lay with Eloise. As he buckled Piper inside her car seat, Beckett's back was rigid. Mom, it'll be just you and me next time, he said, gesturing toward Eloise. If you insist on it, I'll make it a rule. Eloise smirked as though she'd won a prize. That's the smartest thing I've heard all morning. Rowan watched helplessly as Beckett zipped his jacket and collected his work bag. The baby gurgled faintly, tiny eyes blinking at the overhead light, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the nursery door. Rowan swallowed an ache. This was her family, husband and mother-in-law, solidified against her. Beckett adjusted his lapel, smoothing an invisible crease from his blazer. He seemed to shrink slightly under Eloise's gaze. I'll let you know what time I get home, he said, voice tight. And I'll pay for whatever furnace hours you need. Eloise nodded imperiously.
Fine.
By the time we get back from Helena, you can put both of your feet under my table and listen to reasons, not modern fairy tales. Beckett turned and walked out into the hallway, shoulders hunched as though bearing the weight of an avalanche. Rowan followed close behind, heart sinking. When he closed the front door, a sharp click resonated. The sound echoed through her chest, a barrier firmly barred between Beckett's world and hers. In the silence that followed, Rowan gently removed Piper's blanket and settled the baby back into her bassinet. Piper's curly eyelashes fluttered one more time, then receded into sleep. Rowan cradled her arm over Piper, letting the baby's steady breathing anchor her. She took a slow breath, trying to let go of the stinging betrayal. At that moment, Ironwood's kitchen clock chimed 8, its sound resonant against the early morning hush. The wind rattled the eaves, and the fireplace, still burning embers from last night, finally crackled back to life. Rowan knew this pattern would repeat for the next week, a lonely vigil at night, a silent struggle by day. As she stroked Piper's blanket, Rowan resolved to push forward alone. Whenever Beckett sided with his mother's outdated dogma rather than her clear plan, she would stand her ground. This was her daughter's life, not a battleground for tradition. And in each beat of Piper's small heart, Rowan found the courage to face the cold, unmoving outlook of her husband and mother-in-law. The wind outside picked up, carrying motes of frost that gleamed like tiny diamonds across the windowpane. Rowan pressed a hand to her daughter's head and whispered, "We'll do this ourselves if we have to, Piper. You and me, just us two against the world." And in that solemn moment, Ironwood's mountain silence didn't feel suffocating. It felt like a promise that one day soon, Rowan's resolve and Piper's quiet strength would melt away the icy resistance of those around them. For now, though, she embraced the pang of isolation, knowing the battles ahead would test her faith, her resilience, and ultimately her very sense of family. Rowan's days had fallen into a predictable cadence. At dawn, she'd tiptoe into Piper's nursery, taking care to position her blankets just so. By mid-morning, she hustled Piper into her car seat and dropped her at the Ironwood Community Day Nursery. Then she drove the 20 minutes into Helena to her PR office at St. Jude Regional Hospital, where she spent most of the afternoon managing health campaigns. In the early evening, she fetched Piper, hurried home to the Palmer homestead, baked something, often blueberry muffins, and tried desperately to squeeze at least 2 hours of work on her Helena trip paperwork before running back upstairs to rock Piper to sleep. It was during those precious 2 hours in the office, when fatigue from infant feeding still spun through her mind, that Rowan began noticing Sloane Rivers, the new receptionist, in a series of incongruities. It started subtly, as small things often do, a whispered laugh in the hallway as Beckett slipped past her cubicle, a set of high heels clicking on the linoleum just a second later, as though following his footsteps. Rowan would peer up from her desk, only to see Sloane's honey-blonde hair swaying around her shoulders as she offered a bright, practiced smile to a stranger in the lobby. No big deal, she told herself. He was her husband. She was his boss's new receptionist. They said good morning. It hardly warranted alarm. But over the next week, those occurrences began piling up. Subtle acts, like the way Beckett would sometimes hesitate in Sloane's doorway, leaning so close that his voice dropped to a murmur. Or how folded bits of paper he slid beneath Sloane's name tag, which always seemed to vanish before Rowan could glimpse their contents. Sloane had been hired on a contract basis just 3 weeks ago, fresh out of Bozeman. She'd spoken of working underwritten medical claims for years, then relocating for family reasons. She wore minimal jewelry, a silver chain with a tiny, polished quartz crystal, and suits that fit her slim frame precisely. Her appearance was unassuming, until the way she looked at Beckett whenever they thought no one was looking. One Friday evening, Rowan stayed late in the hospital's back office, laboring over budget spreadsheets for their Helena trip, motel rates, fuel costs for the Ford's extended-range fuel tank, cab fare, pediatrician co-pays. Piper's last feeding of the day was at 7 o'clock, but Rowan couldn't pull herself away. She steeled herself for a fight with Eloise over a final thermostat setting, and electronically signed the daycare authorization forms for Piper. Around 8:30, the hallway cutout outside the glass-walled PR office glowed in harsh fluorescent light. Suddenly, she heard those familiar clip-clops, a high-heeled gait approaching, a staccato rhythm that echoed across the linoleum. Rowan lifted her head and saw Sloane Rivers appear by the doorway, pressing a finger to her lips to hush the nurse at the adjacent cubicle. The nurse nodded, her eyes returning to her keyboard, but Rowan felt the heat creep up her neck. Sloane slid noiselessly into the office, her heels clicking just enough to announce her presence. She carried a small, white envelope, which she tucked into the breast pocket of her crisp black blazer, like someone hiding a secret. Rowan watched from behind the gleam of her computer monitor while Sloane dipped her head and tapped on Beckett's locked office door. Seconds later, the door clicked open, and Beckett's tall figure surrounded Sloane on 3 sides. Their silhouettes merged in the frosted window pane for a heartbeat, then separated. Rowan glimpsed Sloane's hand on Beckett's chest, palm flat against his shirt, her thumb tracing under his collarbone. Beckett cleared his throat, then closed the door, cutting off Rowan's view. In that fleeting moment, Rowan's chest tightened. The shape of Sloane's hand on Beckett's shirt was a signature Rowan had never pressed to her own husband's chest. Rowan forced her shoulders to stay still, swallowing her rising panic. Her pulse pounded in her ears, but she dared not raise her voice or move. A moment later, Beckett emerged alone, smoothing his tie. Sloane remained within, the edge of a silky scarf visible in the gap under the door. Beckett gave a tight-lipped nod to Rowan, as though to say, "Don't ask." Then he strode down the hall. When Beckett's footsteps faded, Rowan exhaled a slow breath. She stared at the closed door, at the faintest wisp of Sloane's platinum hair glinting in the sliver of light. Her mind raced through every context that could explain it. Sloane was simply dropping off sensitive paperwork, perhaps a last-minute policy update? But why had her palm lingered on Beckett's chest? Innocent gestures rarely required such lingering proximity. That weekend, Rowan tried to brush off her unease. On Saturday morning, she took Piper to a toddler music class in Helena, then met Beckett for brunch at Timber and Stone Cafe in Ironwood. He wore a navy blue Oxford shirt, sleeves casually rolled, with neat stubble dotting his jaw. Piper bounced on his knee, cooing at every pancake garnish. "Best pancakes in Montana, hands down," Beckett declared, flipping a forkful into his mouth, peppermint stick smugness in his eyes. "Mom taught me that." He offered Rowan half his pancakes. She declined. She barely touched her scrambled eggs, her gaze flicking occasionally to the entrance each time a couple walked in. You never know who's tracking you down, Rowan thought, tasting bitterness at the back of her tongue. After brunch, they stopped at Ironwood Branch Insurance. Beckett said he had to retrieve some files. Rowan tagged along, ostensibly to see Mom's progress on knitting Piper's booties. But as soon as they walked in, Sloane was there holding a document portfolio. She greeted them with that same practiced, too bright smile. When she stepped forward to hand Beckett a manila folder stamped urgent, she pressed her gloved fingertips to his forearm in a gesture that seemed oddly intimate, almost as if she were trying to convey reassurance in a secret language. Their eyes met for an imperceptible second, and Sloane's eyelashes dipped down, revealing a flicker of anticipation. Rowan stiffened beside them. Beckett glanced at Rowan uncomfortably and edited his tone to professional. "Thanks, Sloane. I'll review this tonight after I put Piper to bed." He immediately took a seat at his desk, carefully folded the folder on top of a tidy stack of claims. Sloane tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and offered Rowan a cool nod before walking away. Something about Sloane's posture, tilted forward in self-assured alignment, irritated Rowan. Back home, Rowan watched Beckett in the kitchen as he assembled an overnight shift bag for Piper. She noticed something else for the first, a faint smudge of worn-off lip stain on his collar. Each time Beckett left her side, Rowan's glance flicked to that stain, as though it were the flicker of a billboard sign. Something isn't right. That night, Rowan lay in bed next to Beckett, the quilt draped over them both. She could hear the soft hum of a late-night weather report on TV downstairs. Beckett's breathing was even. She hugged Pettifer, the stuffed doll she'd bought for Piper, beneath one arm. She opened the flashlight app on her phone and checked the insurance, urban claim, document Beckett had set on his desk. Across the top was Sloane's name in neat, typeset letters. This was no casual arrangement. She was his direct liaison. Rowan's fingertips slid down to hold Sloane's window reflection beneath the desk lamp. Her mind traced the gestures she'd witnessed. The whispered meeting in Beckett's office, the palm to his chest, the lingering gaze. Suddenly, Beckett stirred, shifting his pillow. Her heart lurched. Rowan locked the screen and tucked the phone under her pillow, closing her eyes. But sleep refused to come. She felt pinned beneath Beckett's nearness, that lingering scent of his sandalwood cologne, and Sloane's presence haunting her thoughts. By Tuesday, Rowan had resolved to gather more evidence. She reviewed her cell phone records. She and Beckett had exchanged fewer than 10 texts that day, 2 about Piper's feeding schedule, 1 confirming the Helena motel. Beckett's phone showed 2 missed calls from Sloane at precisely 7:48 a.m. and 7:51 a.m., times when Beckett told Rowan he was commuting. The calls vanished moments after each connection. That afternoon, Rowan slipped into the parking lot of Ironwood Branch Insurance, pretending to help a client load documents into her sedan. She watched through the tinted rear window as Sloane emerged from the front door of the branch, keys jingling. She was alone, wearing a charcoal pencil skirt and that silver quartz necklace, an echo of hidden meanings. Rowan waited until Sloane slid into her black Jetta, engine humming. Then she dropped off her client and lurked behind her car, dialing Beckett's number. He picked up. "Meet me at Aspen and Pine in 20 minutes, Rowan whispered. She hung up, leaving Beckett's puzzled response to reverberate in her mind. 20 minutes later. The sloping driveway to Aspen and Pine, an early 1900s lodge converted into an alpine, chalet-style restaurant, crisped under snow-dusted pines. Rowan parked at a discreet angle, just far enough from the valet stand that she'd remain inconspicuous. She slipped on a wool wrap and combed her fingers through her hair. Her heartbeat pounded against her chest. Tonight, she'd catch them in the act. In the half-light of the dining room, antique chandeliers glowed like suspended lanterns. Sloane sat at a corner table with her back to the window. Her blonde hair fell straight and glossy below her shoulders. A tall glass of raspberry sparkling water rested near her right hand. Beckett approached, a dinner menu tucked under his left arm. She greeted him with a slow smile, her lumbar pivoting as if she wanted to stretch toward him. Beckett's posture slumped into relief at seeing her, as though he'd been awaiting a secret signal. Rowan slipped to a seat 2 tables away, biting her lip, half concealed behind a towering sprig of holiday, deodorized pine bough. She kept her phone camera ready, fully knowing that by the time she raised the lens, any telltale evidence would be gone. Both ordered salmon and red wine. But as the server walked away, Beckett put his hand on Sloane's back, a light rest, but more intimate than anyone would ever need to greet a colleague. He leaned in low, and for a heartbeat, they whispered. Then Sloane's head fell onto Beckett's shoulder, and he reached across the table to lay a ring box in front of her, an object too large, too garish, for innocent fiancé banter. Rowan's breath snagged. The fetal, pink box lay open beneath the chandelier's glow, a ribbon unwound like a blood-red promise. Beckett traced a fingertip around the fine band inside, 2 slender bands interlocked, studded with tiny white diamonds. Sloane's glossy lips parted in disbelief. She ran her hand along the tabletop, fingertips tingling. Beckett watched her, eyes so soft they shimmered. Rowan's camera shutter clicked once, but Beckett and Sloane barely stirred. They were in that private world where only their shared breath existed. Rowan could see Sloane's cheeks flush. Beckett put a forearm lightly across her wrist. They examined the ring together, as though no one else in the restaurant mattered. In the corner of her eye, Rowan noticed the server approach with a fresh basket of bread. She stifled a gasp, her knuckles white around the phone. Beckett glanced up, as though Rowan's distant silhouette had sent a wave of sickness across the floor. He lowered his gaze and offered Sloane a soft word. Rowan slid out of her chair and scurried toward the restrooms to collect herself. In the cramped, tile-blasted vestibule, she pressed her palm against the cool mirror. Above the sink, a small placard read, "Welcome to Aspen and Pine, where whispers become memories." Rowan leaned in close and exhaled, feeling tears burn in her eyes. She rifled through her purse and slid her phone into open camera mode, her fingers vibrating as Beckett's name glowed on the caller ID. Sloane had called exactly 20 minutes ago. The ring they'd shared in the candlelight didn't need captioning. She snapped 2 or 3 photos. Beckett's head bowed as he touched the ring. Sloane's expression a mix of delight and awe. Proof enough. When she returned to the main dining area, the table was empty. Beckett and Sloane had slipped out through the back door. The staff, astonished at their abrupt exit, claimed they'd left in a haze of snow. Beckett's navy pea coat flapping, Sloane's heels clicking down the back steps. Rowan spotted a single pinprick of red, Sloane's lipstick, now embedded on Beckett's collar. Mortified at the sight, Rowan extracted the collar to inspect. The lipstick smudge was unmistakable, a bright rubellite stain. Beckett's coat, now draped over his chair, bore a faint scent of peppermint and that same sandalwood cologne. Rowan closed her eyes and blinked back tears. She retrieved her phone from the purse, scrolled to the lock screen, 2 photos, time-stamped 8 minutes ago. She pressed save, just as Beckett's name popped up, the incoming call pulling her from her daze. "Ro." Beckett's voice echoed through the phone. It sounded clipped, breathless, urgent. "Where are you? Why didn't you come back last night?" "Beckett," Rowan said, her voice soft but firm. "I saw you. At Aspen and Pine." There was a crackle of static. "What are you talking about?" he asked, and the heat in his voice melted Rowan's fragile composure. Oh, don't lie, Beck. I have photos. I saw Sloane's hand at your chest. I saw the ring box. You think I wouldn't notice when she emerged from your office this morning? He inhaled sharply, his next words swallowed by a thump of something heavy. Rowan, it's not what you think. Rowan heard the creak of his chair, the ruffle of paper. Then tell me what it is. I'm done pretending. She ended the call and slipped her phone into her purse, feeling the acid of betrayal settle in her gut. When Beckett finally came home that night, his face was drawn and hollow. Eloise was already in the kitchen, knitting slippers in deep navy blue. She looked over her glasses, as though she'd been waiting for his return. Rowan stood by the hearth, Piper safe upstairs. Beckett hovered in the doorway, as though unsure who to face first. Beckett, Rowan said in a level voice, we need to talk. Eloise's leathered hands stilled on the checkered squares of yarn. Her gaze flicked between them. In that pregnant silence, Rowan understood she stood alone in a triangle of deceit. A hush settled over the kitchen. Piper's soft coo drifted down the hallway, an innocent reminder of the stakes. At that moment, Rowan made herself stand straighter. She would no longer be a silent partner in this charade. Tonight, the forgotten ring, smeared lipstick, and Sloane's close hand were not merely hints. They were a reckoning. She turned away from Beckett's doorway, lifting her chin toward Eloise. We all see what's going on, she said, voice low but unwavering. And I will not be complicit. Beckett looked as though lightning struck him. Eloise's knitting fell to her lap. In the charged hush, Rowan felt power rise in her chest. No matter the cost, she would protect her heart, and above all, Piper, from the fractures of their deceit. Over the next week, Rowan's office hours became a delicate, high-stakes balancing act. Each morning, she dropped Piper at the Ironwood Community Day Nursery before heading to Helena to compile the definitive PR plan for the hospital's new mobile clinic. But beneath those spreadsheets and draft press releases, Rowan harbored an uneasy secret, the deepening suspicion that Sloane Rivers was systematically undermining her, stealing clients, erasing Rowan's hard work. In the soft hum of the St. Jude Regional Press Room, Rowan bookmarked a section of her Excel sheet summarizing upcoming community outreach events. She would normally email that sheet directly to Beckett so he could coordinate publicity for the Ironwood branch insurance sponsorship. Instead, now she downloaded a copy and saved it under an obscure file name, capital campaign _master Helena V1 final. Then she emailed capital campaign _Helenav1 final edited to Beckett. That version contained every minor detail for client A and client B, two local ranchers she'd nurtured toward a special multi-million-dollar life insurance package. In contrast, the master copy hid those names under cryptic codes, RCHLNE and SMLFLD, so that if anyone snooped at a glance, they would know who the real clients were. Why the cloak and dagger routine? Because each time Rowan worked late, she noticed Sloane loitering in Beckett's office, often filing paperwork at odd hours. Rowan sensed that Sloane had ways of fishing out Rowan's contract lists, appropriating them into her own pipeline. Once, when Rowan quizzed Sloane about a specific policy writer, Sloane had laughed, saying, "Oh, I thought you weren't handling that client. I guess I just assumed someone else had submitted it." The casual ease of the statement convinced Rowan of Sloane's crafty advantage. If left unchecked, Sloane would walk off with all the credit and Rowan's commissions. One particularly tense Tuesday afternoon, Rowan arrived to find Sloane stationed behind the front desk, phone pressed to her ear. Beckett's office door stood slightly ajar. When Rowan passed the threshold, she glimpsed Beckett leaning forward, his arm draped around Sloane's shoulder. On his desk lay a freshly printed two-page summary of Client A's final premium rates, that same ranching family Rowan had been nurturing for months, walking them through every benefit, negotiating each rider. Rowan's stomach clenched. This was the deal she had meticulously closed last week, yet she'd barely had a chance to formalize the paperwork. She cleared her throat. "Beckett, Beckett's gaze snapped from Sloane to Rowan, shock flickering in his eyes. Sloane's hand darted to conceal the printed summary under her clipboard. Oh, Rowan. Beckett's tone was too steady, too practiced. She was just helping me prepare the final paperwork for Mrs. Henderson up at Caldwell Ranch. Mrs. Henderson was my client, Rowan said, voice low but firm. I walked onto her property with you last month. I did every site visit. Those exact numbers come from my analysis. Beckett rubbed his forehead, pinching the space above his nose. Ro, it's not a big deal. We were both busy. Sloane saw the opportunity to finalize it. Sloane smiled. Too broad, too rehearsed. Just trying to lighten Beckett's load. He's juggling too many accounts.
Rowans gut typend.
You weren't even CC'd on my original correspondence with the Hendersons. You just picked it up after I left the office. This is exactly what I feared. Beckett rose to his full height, looming over Rowan. Listen, I appreciate everything you do, but we're a team here. You're going to have to share the credit. Rowan pressed her lips together, not wanting to cry in the carpeted cubicle. I didn't sign up for that. Not after 12 weeks of maternity leave and hours locked in this office. If you need help, hire a competent assistant. Don't let her walk off with my clients. Sloane's pink-cheeked expression remained unmoved. She looked past Rowan to Beckett, offering a silent, triumphant nod. Don't worry, Beckett.
I can handle them.
Just let me know the next one you want me to finalize. She turned on a heel and strode from the office, clipboard clutched to her chest. Rowan watched her go, feeling hollow but resolute. Beckett hovered, his jaw tight. Ro, can we talk tonight? He asked. Privately. She shook her head, snatching up her purse.
No, Beckett.
We'll talk tomorrow, when I've cooled off. Tonight, I need to go home to Piper. She exited, leaving him in the empty cubicle, faced with a silence that spoke volumes. That evening, as the telephone wires outside hummed with a winter chill, Rowan cradled Piper in her arms, swaying gently to the same lullaby she sang the first night. Piper's eyes fluttered, half closed, still adjusting to the extra layers of blankets. Rowan stared at her own reflection in the bathroom mirror, shadowed rings beneath her eyes, a pale complexion she hadn't recognized until now. She was burned out, juggling 2 full-time jobs, mother and professional. The idea of confronting Beckett again made her chest tight. Yet she knew she couldn't back down. She returned to her laptop. Once Piper drifts to sleep, a hush would settle over the homestead, logging into Ironwood Branch's shared drive to confirm her suspicions. There, she found Sloane's digital trail. Client A and Client B folders now included Sloane's initials. The timestamp showed Sloane's edits dated 2 days earlier. Forgetting time altogether. Rowan downloaded the last edit history and archived versions from 2 months prior, proof that she had originated both contracts, complete with detailed notes and email chains. She sent the comparative files to her personal email, then deleted every trace from the branch's drive. Tomorrow, she would show Beckett the hard evidence, no room for his plausible deniability. When Beckett arrived home at nearly midnight, Rowan was perched at the dining table, laptop open to her meticulously organized folder, evidence_client_thefts. He set down his briefcase and removed his coat, suspicious at her grim expression. Rowan, it's late, he said quietly. Can we do this in the morning? Rowan stood, holding up her phone. I have all the email chains, the timestamps, the editable master versions showing Sloane's depropriation. She didn't just help. She stole my clients 2 weeks ago and again yesterday. Beckett leaned against the door, rubbing his temples. Okay, let me. She cut him off, voice weary but unbending. You said we were a team. Well, I need you to decide where your loyalty lies. Because if you cover for her, you're covering for a thief. And I'm not sure that's something I can forgive. The silence that followed felt like a bell toll in their marriage. Beckett's eyes glistened as he took in the full gravity of Rowan's words. In that moment, she saw the dawning realization that he could not have both. His perfect new receptionist and the woman who had just given birth to their daughter. Beckett's next words came so quiet they felt like an admission. I need time to process. Rowan nodded, closing her laptop. Good. You process. Because I'm leaving tomorrow at 7 for Helena. When I get back, I expect to see Client A and Client B files removed from all Sloane-branded folders. And no more unsupervised access to my records. Beckett wouldn't meet her eyes. He reached for Piper's hospital, issued car seat to stow it in the trunk. Rowan watched as he loaded the baby bag, nestled next to his briefcase, a bizarre contrast. The machine-like precision with which he prepared to do both fatherly and workmanlike tasks left a hollow in Rowan's heart. When she finally locked the front door to walk to her car, her shoulders felt lighter, as if shedding an armor she never wanted to wear. The rake of headlights from a passing pickup painted the driveway in fleeting half-shadows. In those dark shapes, she foresaw her future. Solo trips to Helena, a small baby nestled in her arms, and a mountain of proof to bring back to her husband. The world was suddenly stone, cold clarity. She would not watch her career and her future disappear at the hands of a manipulative colleague. As Rowan drove into the night, Piper safe in her rear, facing seat, Rowan whispered into the cab's hush. We'll be okay, sweet pea. No one steals our future. And somewhere amid the snow, slicked roads, Rowan felt the first spark of freedom. She was no longer alone, even though Beckett had chosen to stand on a different line.
Tonight.
She had chosen to stand for herself. The pre-dawn sky above Ironwood was a wash of steel blue when Rowan loaded Piper into the back seat of her Toyota Highlander. Frost clung to the windshield in delicate, swirling patterns, glittering under the street lamp's glow. She had placed the lightweight infant car seat atop a pile of thick wool blankets in the rear, ensuring the baby's head would rest just above the protected layer. Rowan's breath skirted across her cheeks as she fastened Piper's harness, humming the same lullaby that had guided them through countless midnight feedings. Beckett, ever dutiful, stood at the driver's side, gloved hand resting on the door frame. Despite the tension between them, his voice was soft. I tuned the radio to a classical station. Thought it might help calm her for the drive. Rowan nodded, grateful but cautious. She placed one hand on his arm before he could snap the door shut. Thank you. But keep it low volume. Her ears are still sensitive. And, Beckett, thank you for the help. He managed a nod, pausing a moment as if collected by something unspoken, then said, I'm sorry about everything. His voice wavered. I know I haven't been fair. Rowan forced a small smile in the dim light. Alone isn't the worst place we can be. She closed the door gently and slid into the passenger seat. Beckett let the door latch click behind her before slipping in, starting the engine. The Highlander's heater kicked on, washing the cabin in warm air scented faintly with Piper's lavender-scented baby wipes. Rowan tucked her wool scarf around her neck and glanced back at the baby, half hidden beneath layered blankets. Piper's large, dark eyes blinked sleepily, as though she sensed the stakes of this journey. The drive to Helena was normally a quiet affair, Forest Service Road 15, into Highway 287, then straight into the city's outskirts. Yet the early November stretch carried risks. Patches of black ice, sudden gusts swirling down from Yarrow Ridge, and the creak of snow-laden branches overhead. Beckett navigated slowly, his fingertips brushing the steering wheel in precise arcs. Every so often, he glanced at Rowan. She simply returned his look, eyes steady. Even cold-blooded fear wouldn't deter her from her purpose tonight. They arrived at the Great Northern Highway exit to Helena a little after 7, the rising sun casting long shadows beneath city streetlights. After stopping for coffee at a 24-hour drive-through, Beckett guided them to the parking lot of St. Jude Regional Hospital, a large complex of gray stone and glass towers. The hospital's main entrance section glowed softly against the pale sky, its sign illuminated, St. Jude Regional Pediatric Services. In the parking garage, Rowan gathered her essentials in a diaper bag, 2 extra bottles of warmed formula, a soft cotton blanket, an extra onesie, diaper supplies, and her wallet. She slipped her phone and keys into the bag's outer pocket, where she could retrieve them quickly. Piper gurgled, her chubby cheeks pressed against the fleece blanket. We'll be quick. Rowan whispered as she closed Piper's car seat for the final click. Promise. Beckett wrapped his arm around her shoulders but said nothing as they exited the SUV. They found an elevator to level 2 of the hospital, following signs to pediatric outpatient vaccination services. Hallways were silent at this hour, sterile but not unwelcoming, punctuated by colorful mobiles hanging near the ceilings and framed children's drawings lining the walls. In vaccination services, a single nurse prepared syringes behind a curved counter. A ticking clock mounted just above labeled 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. indicated the morning's window. Restless toddlers sat in a row of pediatric chairs, coloring pages scattered on the table. Beeping monitors hummed softly in the background. Rowan signed forms at the front desk, proof of residence, pediatrician's note, then lifted Piper's fleece front and escorted her to the nurse, who examined her chart on a tablet. 3 months old. First dose of hepatitis B vaccine?
Got it.
The nurse's practiced hands wiped an alcohol swab on Piper's tiny thigh. The baby fussed, but Rowan held her steady while the nurse administered the vaccine. Once the bandage was secure, clear, thin, and dotted with a miniature panda decal, Rowan scooped Piper into her arms. The baby's lip quivered. Tears sprang into her eyes, but Rowan whispered softly, "It's done, sweet pea." Piper sniffled, fists raised to her mouth, and settled again as the nurse offered a pacifier. Beckett took a photo of the bandage, just as evidence for their chart back in Ironwood. Rowan forced a grateful smile. But her mind was already on the real reason for this trip, retrieving the dashcam memory card hidden in his truck, a card that contained the proof she needed to remove Beckett's illusions once and for all. When they left the hospital, the November sun was higher, glinting off black crossover SUVs. Beckett guided them back to the basement parking garage, leaving the Highlander exactly where they'd parked it, stall 17. Near the mild white glow of overhead LEDs. Snowflakes began drifting outside, small, feathery patterns that vanished as soon as they met the heated asphalt. Beckett retrieved a small black bag from the trunk. "Just an extra jacket," he said. In Rowan's mind, that jacket would transform into the vessel for her talisman of truth. He slipped into his insulated coat, zipped the pockets, and popped the hood. His navy cap concealed the scuff mark on his hairline from last night's confrontation. They approached Beckett's 2018 Ford F-150, parked 2 spaces down from them. The keys were already in Beckett's hand. He unlocked the truck, and the interior light glowed faintly. From the driver's seat, nestled behind the rear-view mirror, Rowan glimpsed the black plastic shell of the dashcam, its lens pointed forward. As if unconcerned that it was recording more than mountain roads, it was capturing hidden truths. Beckett slid into the driver's seat, setting the truck's engine to low idle so the cabin warmed quickly. The heater roared to life. Rowan perched on the passenger side step, holding Piper wrapped in her blanket. She admired how Beckett's breath escaped his lips in a small cloud as he surveyed the cabin. Without removing Piper from her blankets, Rowan leaned in and pointed to the base of the rearview mirror. "Beckett, I need to get that memory card." Beckett's jaw tightened. "I don't know." "Please," Rowan said, her tone steely. "I need it." Beckett exhaled slowly, turning off the engine. The dashcam's tiny red light blinked, proof it was powered. Beckett's fingers slid across the ceiling's fabric, retrieving the clip near the dashcam mount. He popped the cover, revealing a slender microSD card nestled in its slot. Rowan's heart hammered. The camera's firmware flashed a soft green as he slid the card out and held it up. "Here," he said, hesitantly offering it. Rowan took the card, tucking it inside an inner pocket of her black pea coat. "Thank you." She pressed her lips together, fighting back tears. Beckett closed the clip. The dashcam fell silent, but Rowan could hear a murmur of static, like it was holding its breath. 2. In the Highlander's passenger seat, Rowan closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breath. Behind her, through the frosted rear window, she glimpsed Beckett starting the engine again. She kissed Piper's forehead and whispered, "We have the key." Back on Highway 287, The morning light had melted most of the frost, but the air remained crisp. The far-off mountains tipped with snow rose in stark, white ridges against the steel sky. Beckett drove in silence, heavy as the miles between them. Rowan sat quietly, cleaning Piper's tiny vaccination bandage corner with a damp cloth. The baby drank in the view of passing pines and drifting flakes through her window. When they re-entered Ironwood's rural sprawl, Rowan felt a gumption bubble up, an urgency that propelled her forward. They arrived at home just after 10:30. The homestead's exterior was still decorated with the first glimmers of holiday lights, wreaths of juniper hanging on the front door. Eloise's sob sat in the driveway, its windows iced over, evidence that her mother-in-law was already up and about. Beckett helped Rowan unload Piper and the bag of extra jackets. Rowan tucked Piper into her crib, double-checked the thermostat at 65 degrees, then locked the door behind her as she descended the stairs to the garage. The moment she was out of sight, Rowan closed the garage door, two low clicks echoing in the cold, empty space. In the dimly lit garage, the Highlander's glow under the motion sensor lights guided her to the center console. Beckett's black duffel bag, the one he'd packed for a weekend away, still lay under the passenger seat. Inside, she patted down the jackets until her fingers brushed the micro SD card. Wrapped in a small square of red felt, she slipped it into the coin compartment beside her car's glove box, where she kept her important documents folder. Birth certificate, car registration, Piper's vaccine record. Now it would hold the proof that changed everything. Before she could process her triumph, Beckett's footsteps sounded behind her. She turned to see him standing under the cold strip light, shoulders slumped. "It's done," she said, voice measured. "Thanks." Beckett looked away, focusing on the textured cement floor. "Okay," he said softly. "Let's go inside." Rowan replaced his silence with resolve. She closed the car door and adjusted the duffel bag so its contents felt heavier than before. In that weight lay unspoken truths, images of Beckett and Sloane at Aspen and Pine, the whispers caught on dashcam audio, the timestamp of Betrayal. Every second of the drive to Helena. She'd known happiness would be short-lived. But now, with the micro SD card hidden away, she possessed her own power, the means to demand the honesty she deserved. As the garage door rolled up, Rowan lifted her chin. She would show Beckett the evidence soon. She would prove it all. And tonight, under Ironwood's pinprick stars, she'd find out if their marriage could withstand the fallout, or if it would shatter like brittle ice under the Montana sun. It was a crisp Thursday evening, exactly 200 days after Beckett first introduced Sloane to Ironwood as Reagan, our new junior underwriter. Outdoor string lights glowed along the treeline of Aspen and Pine's patio, giving the lodge a twinkling, fairy-lit air. Inside, the dining room's large windows revealed frost-laced pine needles, while warm lamplight bathed guests in a golden glow. Rowan arrived in a charcoal wrap dress and low winter boots, Piper bundled in her infant car seat and nestled on her hip. She paused at the entrance, inhaling the mingled scents of cedarwood, spiced apple cider, and the faintest wisp of cinnamon, hallmarks of an Aspen and Pine winter gathering. The party had been billed to all of Beckett's business contacts as a celebration. Congratulations to Beckett and Sloane, 200 days and counting. Beckett's mother, Eloise, had been reluctant but ultimately agreed to host as a family gathering under the guise of a milestone anniversary. Invitations had gone out to all local ranchers, Helena executives, and select hospital administrators, anyone who'd ever done business with the Palmers or attended St. Jude regional fundraisers. Rowan knew exactly how many people would turn up. A good 80-plus guests, including Beckett's closest friends and colleagues, as well as entire families. She would have preferred a small, private affair. But her plan required the visibility that came only with a public shaming. Rowan tightened her grip on Piper's car seat strap. She'd been replaying the evidence all day. The photos from Aspen and Pine's corner table, dashcam timestamps, and Sloane's file annotations. Tonight, she would show the world Beckett's betrayal. She caught a glimpse of Sloane's electric red dress, halter-neck satin, through the double doors and felt a cold wash of determination. As she stepped into the lobby, the string quartet, nestled in the left corner behind a small evergreen display, adjusted their music stands. Guests clustered around high cocktail tables, sipping champagne flutes etched with Sloane and Beckett's names and the date, June 2nd, 2025. A 200 Days banner hung above the main archway, formal and celebratory, glittering gold against the deep green of pine boughs. Rowan spotted Beckett near the bar, chatting with Marcus Caldwell, owner of Caldwell Ranch, and 2 insurance brokers from Helena. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing a pale forearm where a faint tattoo peaked, a silhouette of a pronghorn antelope. Sloane floated beside him, her manicured hand resting lightly on his elbow. Every so often, she'd brush back a lock of her platinum hair, revealing a silver stud in her earlobe. Beckett's eyes softened in her direction. Rowan's chest tightened at the sight. It was worse than imagined, the ease with which they moved together. 2 halves of a chapter she'd never finish. Eloise stood near the head buffet table, arms crossed behind her back, scanning the room. When her gaze met Rowan's, she offered a curt nod that won't forgive or forget. In that moment, Rowan felt the inscrutable distance between mothers, divided not just by loyalty, but by allegiance. Happy 200 days, a tap on her shoulder startled her. It was Harper Jensen, an elderly rancher whose family had insured 5 generations with the Palmers. Glad you could join us. Becky's account has never looked better, thanks to you both.
Harper Peret Beniat Herstraustetzon hat.
Rowan forced a polite smile and nodded, her mind racing for the moment to arrive. Rowan set Piper on a padded stool at a low side table, then turned to move toward a spot near the center of the room. Beckett and Sloane had agreed to the first toast at precisely 7:15 p.m., so Rowan positioned herself where the quartet's music drifted. She surreptitiously tucked her phone into her palm concealed beneath the tablecloth. She would be ready to stream live if necessary. At 7:05, the quartet's cellist struck the final note of a gentle waltz. The chatter dwindled. Beckett stepped forward with a flute raised, Sloane at his side with a radiant smile. The room's wooden rafters echoed as they faced their circle of friends, family, and select press. A local newspaper reporter in a tweed blazer scribbled in a small notepad, eyeing Beckett with professional interest. "Thank you all for gathering here tonight," Beckett began, his voice perfectly measured. "When Reagan and I first met 200 days ago, I never expected this kind of support. From day one, she's been my rock, my partner in everything. Reagan, here's to us." He tapped his flute. Clinking glasses provided a quick, appreciative ripple. "I love you." He turned, planting a light kiss on Sloane's cheek. Sloane's lips curved, a hint of the same sparkle in her eyes that Rowan had seen at Aspen and Pine months ago. Sloane raised her flute. "Thank you, Beckett. But let me correct one thing. We're not just partners. We're an unstoppable duo. Together, we'll keep Ironwood Branch Insurance at the top, keep local families and our daughter protected for years to come." At that last phrase, "our daughter," the entire room tapped their glasses and murmured congratulations. A hush fell. Rowan felt the basin of her stomach drop. If Sloane truly believed Piper was their daughter, then she was weaving a public lie. A ripple of toasts followed as champagne flowed across the tables. Rowan stepped into the circle. Beckett caught her eye. He hesitated, alerting her that Sloane's fabricated daughter would soon collide with reality. When the noise settled to a hum, Rowan's voice cut through. "If I might have everyone's attention, please." The quartet tucked away their bows. Beckett frowned. Sloane took a half step back, noticing the shift in focus. Rowan raised her phone. The hush deepened. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, but curiosity held their gaze. Rowan cleared her throat. "Tonight marks 200 days since Beckett and Sloane first became more than colleagues." She clicked record on her phone, capturing the expectant hush. "I want to share some things that have come to light, and things you should know, before you offer congratulations or sign that card that's passed around." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Beckett's face paled. Sloane's lips fluttered. a flicker of panic across her flawless red lipstick. Perched on her bar stool, Piper stirred, arched her back slightly, sensing the tension. Rowan reached for Piper, tucking the baby in her other arm, ensuring her protected as she delivered her words. "This ring," Rowan announced, drawing the identical ring box she'd snatched from Sloane's table at Aspen and Pine. Holding it aloft, gasps echoed among the ranchers near the buffet. "Beckett bought this engagement ring for Sloane 6 weeks ago. Only he and I are legally married." She clicked her phone, flipping through the Aspen and Pine photos, Sloane and Beckett whispering at the corner table, Sloane's palm pressed to Beckett's chest as he slid the box. The slideshow flicked to lights, laughter. Then back to Beckett's ring slipping onto Sloane's finger. The screen glowed across the room. Everyone watched Beckett's face go from confusion to consternation. "Excuse me?" Someone in the back muttered. Beckett's cousin, Martin, one of his closest friends, stepped forward, brow furrowed. Rowan ignored the question and continued. "Here's more." She held up her phone again, bringing up a screenshot of Beckett's email chain. Multiple timestamped attachments revealing that Sloane had taken 2 local rancher contracts, contracts A and B, right out of my care. That email thread showed Rowan as the original account manager, followed by Sloane's CC, editing notes after hours, rewriting my proposals as S. Rivers. Another chorus of shocked whispers erupted. Martin shook his head, eyes flicking to Sloane, to Beckett. Disbelief etched across his face. "She was taking your clients? Without your knowledge?" Rowan set Piper across her hip, steadying her voice so every word carried. "Yes. She forged her credentials into my records, closing 2 of my contracts I had shepherded for months, dealing directly with the Hendersons of Caldwell Ranch. Just as an example, I rode out there in December, met with Mr. and Mrs. Henderson in their barn office. The entire stakeholders committee was convinced. Sloane showed up 2 days later, used my detailed proposals, and executed the policy under her name." She paused as her gaze locked onto Beckett's, deepened by betrayal. "I have the PDF timestamps, the email threads, and the dashcam footage from November when I saw them leave Aspen and Pine's back entrance together." She slipped another card from her coat pocket, the microSD. "All stored here. On this card. Everything you see is timestamped, unalterable." Beckett's jaw worked. Sloane's face drained of color. She attempted to step forward, but was blocked by Eloise, who now stood silent, knitting needles still poised in midair. Martin ran a hand through his graying hair. "Sloane, is this?" Sloane shook her head, scanning the room, then glared at Beckett. "Martin, look. Rowan's making this into a spectacle." Beckett raised a hand to silence her. He turned a sorrowful glance toward Rowan. Rowan met his eyes with unwavering resolve. "Beckett, that ring is worthless. The reputation you've built here, gone." She gestured at Sloane's crimson gown, her auburn hair catching the chandelier's glow. "I trusted you. I trusted us. This." She tapped the ring briefcase, sending a crisp metallic jingle across the marble floor. "This ring matches the proof of your lies. And there's Piper." She pointed down to her daughter. "She's my baby. Not yours and not Sloane's." Shock rippled through the room. The rancher families exchanged horrified looks. A trio of Helena brokers stepped back, eyes widening at the scandalous tableau. Harper Jensen muttered under his breath, something about family dishonor. Eloise, immobile and tense, watched her son shrink beneath the weight of betrayal. Beckett's shoulders sagged as though he could no longer hold himself up. "Rowan, He set his palms on his thighs, face contorted. "I never meant for it to go this far." Sloane's eyes flashed venom as she pointed a manicured finger at Beckett. "You told me you were separated, that this marriage was on autopilot." Beckett's father, a stern-faced man with a white mustache, strode from the back of the room. He grabbed Sloane's wrist. "Enough," he said. "You've dragged my son into this entire fiasco." His voice carried the weight of an alpha bull in the pasture, unyielding. Sloane shrank under his gaze. Rowan let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The silence that followed felt like the final chord of a cathedral organ, resonant, heavy, impossible to ignore. Guests hovered in clusters, glancing between Beckett, Sloane, and Rowan. Some turned to each other, murmuring. A lone waitress, balancing a tray of hors d'oeuvres, froze mid-step. Eyes locked on the ring in Rowan's hand and the ring finger on Sloane's hand, still adorned with the engagement band that would never become a wedding ring. Eloise finally moved, her knitting needles clicking onto the table. She pointed at Beckett in a slow, measured motion. "You brought this on yourself." Her voice was low but carried, a judge-passing sentence. "I offered you both enough chances. A ring doesn't cover lies, and a baby doesn't justify deceit." Beckett sank into a nearby chair, his head bowed. Sloane tried to exhale a retort, but John Palmer, Beckett's father, calmly placed his hand on her elbow and guided her away from the crowd. "You're done here," he muttered under his breath. Rowan withdrew herself from the center of attention, gathering Piper and stepping toward the lit doorway. She paused at the threshold and turned back to Zell, Beckett's father, who watched her with the same steely gaze as Eloise. "I'm sorry to do this in front of everyone," Rowan said quietly, voice steady, "but your son decided I deserve to know." She tapped the micro-SD affixed to her coat. "I won't share this publicly, but I stand by what I said. If Beckett and I stayed together, I'd never look at him the same way." Zell nodded, eyes narrowing. "We're all done, Rowan." Rowan raised a hand, not as a plea, but as a benediction, a final farewell to the life she once knew. "Goodbye, Beckett." She passed his father, then her mother-in-law, and into the night, her breath a pale arc under the string lights. Guests stood paralyzed, uncertain whether to cheer her bravery or to simply talk in hushed tones. Outside, snow began drifting in earnest, a gentle hush that covered Ironwood like a blanket. The wind whispered through the pines as Rowan guided Piper to the car. Her heart pounded in her ears, but for the first time in months, the weight of deceit had been set ablaze in public. The pact of lies from that corner table ambush lay shattered, like frost under the morning sun. When Rowan reached the Highlander, she buckled Piper into her car seat and closed the door. Standing behind her, Beckett approached, fingers grazing the cold metal of the back hatch. "Rowan." His voice cracked, snowflakes caught in his brushing hair, as though daring to freeze his words. She turned to look at him, eyes resolute.
"No, Beckett."
"I'm done. From now on, I only listen to Piper's needs." She slid into the passenger seat, settling Piper's blanket over her shoulders. The engine cranked to life. As they rolled away from the lodge, the string lights on Aspen and Pine flickered, like the last pulse of a dying star. Inside the Highlander, the quiet was soft as snowfall. Piper yawned, a small crescent of pink inside her mouth, and Rowan whispered the lullaby she'd sung the first night Piper arrived.
Outside,
Ironwood faded into the gentle hush of a town that had watched everything unfold, epistles of elegance, promises broken, truths laid bare. In that moment, Rowan knew the future would be difficult, but also free of illusions. She held Piper's small hand in hers, feeling her fingers curl. Even as winter's first snow settled over Aspen and Pine and Ironwood's pines, Rowan felt a warmth spread through her chest, the warmth of truth, of integrity restored. And as the Highlander pulled onto the quiet road back home, the first snowflake drifted down upon Piper's forehead, landing as though to bless their journey into an uncertain but honest tomorrow. When Rowan closed the Highlander's door behind her, Ironwood's frigid wind cut through the small breach, as though testing whether she would retreat. She wrapped Piper more tightly in her blanket and inhaled the bracing air, letting the baby's warm weight against her chest steady her racing heartbeat. In the silent driveway, the Aspen and Pine lights glowed dimly behind them, now dwarfed by the dark stands of spruce and fir. Inside the Palmer homestead, the foyer's old lantern flickered. Eloise Palmer stood with her arms folded, knitting needles idle, as Beckett's footsteps echoed up the stairs. Each step sounded like a confession, heavy and regretful. When he reached the first landing, Elliot Beckett Palmer paused, shoulders slumped, blinking under the influence of icy penitence. Eloise's jaw clenched. "That was quite a show to put on, Rowena," she said, using Rowan's full name, a familiar arrow she saved for moments like this. Her knitting lay abandoned on a small side table, unspooling a thread of white yarn. "I should say you embarrassed us all, but clearly you don't care about anything but your own ego." Beckett lingered at the top of the stairs, his navy blue peacoat still dusted with snowflakes. His father, John Palmer, stood near the fireplace in the living room, leaning against the mantel. His grandfatherly bulk filled the space, his ivory mustache twitching in disgust. Rowan drew Piper closer, stepping through the front door, brushing fresh snow from her boots. "Eloise, John, thank you for letting me drop Piper off," she said evenly. She set Piper in her crib in the nursery, without a word. Then she returned to face them, shoulders squared. John's eyes, soft at times, but tonight steely, pierced into her. "We know why you're here," he said, jaw set. "Your little stunt at Aspen and Pine. What you did to Beckett?"
What?
Rowan asked, raising her brow. "I only repeated what Beckett and Sloane did to me. You knew them better than I did. You heard my evidence." Eloise scoffed. "Evidence? A ring box and some photos taken surreptitiously. That's your proof? You've turned our family name into gossip fodder." Rowan's pulse quickened. "I have proof of contract fraud. 2 emails timestamped, dashcam footage. I can hand them over to the board at Ironwood Branch Insurance. The moment you dismiss Sloane, everyone will learn how deep this goes." John Palmer frowned. "You're threatening a woman who's done nothing wrong. Do you have any idea what that means?" "John." Beckett's voice trembled as he descended the stairs. "Rowan, she's telling the truth." He stopped, glancing at Rowan. His face was etched with remorse. "I fell into it. I never meant to hurt you." Rowan swallowed hard. "If you'd never fallen for her lies, Sloane would have never held that ring. I would still be your wife today." She locked eyes with Beckett, searching for any glimmer of the husband she once knew. Beckett closed his eyes and shook his head. John laid a heavy hand on Beckett's shoulder. "Enough." He turned to Rowan. "Your husband made his choice. You're pushing this too far. But I'll tell you this. Once you start a war with the Palmer name, you won't find a safe place to land." Rowan's cheeks flushed with indignation. "I'm not here to wage war on a name. I'm here to protect the truth, and to protect Piper. His choices endanger both." Eloise snapped her knitting to the side. "You'd throw away this family for some half-truths? This is my home. No one humiliates me in my dining room." Rowan bristled. "Don't lecture me about humiliation. You supported his lies." Beckett exhaled, stepping toward his mother. "Mother." Eloise's glare cut him off. "He's my son. I don't want to hear it, Beckett. You betrayed this family's trust." She turned back to Rowan. "And you're no Palmer. You're an outsider stirring the pot." Rowan's gaze flicked to Piper's nursery door, where the muted glow from a nightlight signaled her daughter's sleep. "I'm your daughter-in-law," she reminded Eloise. "I carried your grandson to term and bore him at great cost. Piper's safety means more to me than your family honor." Eloise stiffened, the lines in her face deepening. "Watch your mouth with that child, Rowan." Beckett's chest tightened as he tried once more to interject. "Mom, she's right. Enough," John cut in, his voice like gravel sliding underfoot. "Both of you, Rowena, it's clear you've made your choice. Beckett, you're a grown man. Go to your room." He pointed toward the hallway. "You'll both figure something out by morning. And right now, I want you two out of my house." Beckett's shoulders sagged as he turned and ascended the stairs, his breath visible in the cold entryway. Eloise's knitting needles clicked in a staccato as she stormed from the living room, muttering, "Ungrateful. All of you. Ungrateful." Rowan watched the wooden beams of the ceiling as though searching for strength. "John," she said quietly. He paused, his back still facing her. She swallowed, heart hammering. "I've made my choice too. Beckett." A single footstep echoed. Beckett appeared at the bedroom door, shoulders slumped. He flicked his gaze between Rowan and John. The pain in his eyes was raw, unguarded. Rowan straightened. "Beckett," she said, voice steady, "I'm filing for divorce. I can't move forward while you're married to me in name, when you've given your heart to someone else." Beckett stared at her, every color draining from his face. "Rowan, it's over," she said firmly. "I can't stay in a marriage built on lies and deceit. I'll initiate proceedings tomorrow. Piper will remain my priority." She turned her back on him, facing John and Eloise. "I'll leave my things for storage. By morning, I'll move Piper and me into a temporary apartment." Eloise's knitting fell to the floor. Her eyes, the same icy blue that so often enchanted Ironwood's men, revealed a sneering disbelief. She crossed her arms. "You'd throw your child into the gutter for a few flash photos and accusations?" John rounded on Eloise.
She's earned this.
"Let her do as she must. You stay out of it." He glanced at Rowan. "I'll have Beckett bring over some belongings. No one's interfering. This is her decision." Rowan exhaled, drawing in her resolve like a shield. She stooped, picking up Piper's tiny booty that had dropped near the hallway rug. In that one motion, she cradled her daughter's future.
"Thank you, John," she said.
Without another word, she stepped past Beckett, headed out the front door. Beckett remained rooted in place, as though glued to the landing. The illusion of his marriage cut loose him in an instant, home transformed into a hollow echo of promises once shared. Rowan glanced back briefly. He stared at the floor, unable to lift his eyes. Outside, Ironwood's cold night embraced her as she locked the door behind them. She wrapped Piper's blanket tighter, feeling a fresh urgency thrum in her chest. "Let's go," she whispered. In the driveway, the ground crunched underfoot, each step a rhythm of finality. Eloise's scolding voice drifted faintly through the closed front door. "Ungrateful. Mark my words." Rowan held Piper in one arm, the bag of documents, her marriage certificate, Beckett's insurance records, Sloane's fraudulent files in the other. She took a deep breath and crossed the threshold into a new life, one where her daughter's welfare would no longer be subject to Beckett's divided loyalties or Eloise's domineering authority. Every fiber of Rowan's being trembled under the weight of her decision. She had sacrificed so much, her job stability, her peace, to expose the truth. But as the Highlander pulled away, her eyes on the receding glow of the Palmer homestead, she felt lighter. A single ember of hope flickered, that in time, Piper would grow up free from secrets, that she would someday thank her mother for walking away from everything that once seemed unbreakable. Behind her, the Palmer home faded into the snowy night. Ahead, Ironwood's winding road stretched toward an uncertain horizon. But in Rowan's arms, Piper stirred again and cooed, as though sensing this new chapter's promise. And, in that tender moment, Rowan offered one silent vow. She would keep Piper safe, no matter where the path led. Bright winter sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Lewis County Courthouse, illuminating the polished marble floors and high, arched ceilings. Rowan arrived early with Piper sleeping in her car seat, softly bundled in a pastel, pink knit blanket. She ascended the wide oak staircase, her breath visible in the cold air seeping beneath the front doors. In her hand, she clutched a slim folder marked Palmer vs. Palmer, Final Hearing. Every step toward room 204 felt weighted by months of turmoil. The fallout from Beckett's betrayal, Sloane's dismissal at Ironwood Branch, and the fracturing of the Palmer family's carefully constructed reputation. Inside room 204, a single long bench faced a raised, mahogany judge's desk. Counsel for each party sat at opposing rectangular tables. Beckett occupied the left table, shoulders hunched, dressed in a charcoal suit and tie that looked stiff on him. His posture seemed both apologetic and exhausted. Across the aisle, Rowan sat alone with Piper in her arms, her dark wool coat draped over a chair, her folder open on the table. Her lawyer, Elena Monroe, a crisp, efficient attorney from Missoula, organized exhibits, and explained last-minute procedural details in a hushed tone. "Once we finish presenting your petition, Mr. Palmer may respond. Then the judge will hear arguments on custody, spousal support, and property division. Take your time. We'll be prepared." By 9:15 a.m., both sides had delivered their opening statements. Beckett's counsel, Paul Garrick, spoke quietly. "Your Honor, Mr. Palmer regrets the circumstances leading to this divorce, but wishes for an equitable settlement. He seeks joint custody of Piper and a fair division of marital assets." His words were conciliatory, but Beckett's eyes remained fixed on the courtroom floor. When Garrick finished, Elena rose. "Your Honor, my client, Rowan Howard, is petitioning for sole legal and primary physical custody of Piper, given the breach of trust and evidence of client fraud against Mr. Palmer. She also requests a fair division of the marital estate, including insurance commissions misappropriated by Ms. Sloane Rivers on behalf of Mr. Palmer and reimbursement for attorney fees and moving expenses incurred to protect Piper's welfare." Judge Margaret Elmore, a stern woman with silver hair pulled into a precise chignon, nodded. "Miss Howard, please approach the bench with your documents." Rowan stood, placing Piper, now awake and cooing softly, onto the small wooden witness bench behind her counsel's table. Respecting Rowan's right to comfort her daughter, Judge Elmore allowed Rowan to keep Piper in her arms throughout the proceedings. Rowan's heart pounded as she handed the microSD memory card, printouts of email chains, and the Aspen and Pine photos to the court clerk. Each exhibit was sequentially marked. Exhibit A, dashcam footage metadata. Exhibit B, email correspondence timestamps. Exhibit C, photographs of March 5th engagement ring ceremony. As Elena guided Rowan through her testimony, she spoke in even, measured tones. "Your Honor, Exhibit A confirms that on November 20th at 8:37 p.m., Mr. Palmer and Ms. Rivers exited Aspen and Pine's rear entrance together, engaging in conduct wholly incompatible with marital fidelity. Exhibit B shows I originated Client A and Client B insurance proposals in October, which Ms. Rivers altered and rebranded as her own on November 27th and December 3rd. Exhibit C depicts Ms. Rivers wearing an engagement ring purchased by Mr. Palmer while he was still married. These acts constitute breach of fiduciary duty, moral misconduct, and, most critically, demonstrate Mr. Palmer's instability as a custodial parent." Beckett's face twitched as each exhibit passed to the clerk. He leaned back in his chair, the fabric of his suit wrinkling with the implied reproach. His counsel filed an objection to the moral misconduct claims, but did not contest the admission of evidence. Judge Elmore, papers in hand, asked Beckett's counsel whether he would like to cross-examine. Paul Garrick rose. "Yes, Your Honor." He approached Rowan, flipping through his notebook.
His voice was calm.
"Miss Howard, is it not true that you declined Beckett's request to allow your daughter to spend supervised weekends with her father during this process?" Rowan looked down at Piper and shook her head.
"No, sir."
"I offered supervised visitation. I did not feel comfortable permitting unsupervised or overnight visits, given the circumstances and the emotional turmoil Beckett contributed to." Garrick pressed on. "And yet you did not provide evidence Mr. Palmer ever harmed Piper physically or emotionally?" Rowan's gaze steeled. "Your Honor, Exhibit D is Ms. Rivers' email from December 15th, offering to babysit for Mr. and Mrs. Palmer's holiday party. I accepted and left Piper in Ms. Rivers' care for 2 hours, during which, as Exhibit E, my neighbor's security camera captured Ms. Rivers driving Mr. Palmer's truck on an unsanctioned excursion. While no harm came to Piper, the incident further demonstrated that Ms. Rivers and Mr. Palmer had no regard for parental responsibilities, thus kindizing Piper's safety." Elena handed the footage frame to the clerk, sealing Exhibit E into the record. At noon, after both sides presented exhibits and testimonies, Judge Elmore assessed for lunch. In the courthouse lobby, Rowan fed Piper some warm formula, her hands trembling slightly. Elena patted Rowan's shoulder reassuringly. "You did well. That evidence is airtight. Even if he refutes moral misconduct, his actions will not look good for joint custody. Back in courtroom 204 at 1:30 p.m., Beckett took the stand. His lawyer asked whether he regretted the affair with Sloane Rivers. Beckett paused, eyes reddening, then said, "Yes, beyond words. I let my guard down, trusted the wrong person, and betrayed the woman I loved." He looked at Rowan when he said loved, but she refused to rise from her seat. Under cross-examination, Beckett conceded that he and Sloane never terminated their clandestine relationship until confronted publicly on that February evening at Aspen and Pine. He claimed remorse and pleaded for joint custody of Piper. But when pressed on why he permitted Sloane unsupervised access to Piper, bringing her to the branch office daycare, he faltered. The judge's steely gaze reminded him that portrayals of paternal devotion would not downplay months of egregious misconduct. At 3 p.m., attorneys presented closing arguments. Elena's summary was precise. Beckett's lack of judgment, moral failings, and the emotional harm caused to both Rowan and Piper warranted Rowan's request for sole legal and primary physical custody. She also argued for Beckett to pay $12,000 in spousal maintenance to cover moving expenses, legal fees, and Rowan's lost income while caring for Piper. Additionally, Rowan's share of joint assets, 50% of their mutual bank accounts, half the proceeds from Ironwood branch commissions retained, and a lien for the commissions fraudulently diverted by Sloane. Garrick's final argument acknowledged Beckett's remorse and urged that a father's involvement was in Piper's best interest. But without contesting the evidence, he conceded that Beckett could not be the custodial parent. He asked the judge to grant Beckett reasonable visitation, supervised until the court saw evidence of his stability and prioritization of Piper. At 4:10 p.m., Judge Elmore delivered her decision from the bench, her voice resonating clearly. After thorough review of the evidence, exhibits A through E, and considering both parents' capabilities, this court finds that Ms. Howard shall have sole legal and primary physical custody of the minor child, Piper Palmer. Mr. Palmer is granted supervised visitation every other weekend, pending therapy proof and satisfactory demonstration of stability. Regarding marital assets, Mr. Palmer shall pay Ms. Howard's spousal maintenance of $800 per month for 6 months, primarily to offset moving, legal, and childcare expenses. Assets shall be divided equally. Joint bank accounts, retirement contributions, and proceeds from the 2025 commission, minus amounts Ms. Howard expended to rectify client fraud. Mr. Palmer's palatial Lexus SUV shall be transferred to Ms. Howard's name for safe transportation of the child. Finally, Sloane Rivers' actions violate professional and moral standards. A separate order filing for restitution against Ms. Rivers in the county's civil court is forthcoming. Silence settled, punctuated only by the slight crackle of the room's heat registers. Beckett's shoulders slumped, tears glimmered in his eyes. Rowan exhaled, a tremor in her chest. Piper yawned in her mother's arms, unharmed and oblivious to the gravity of the proceedings. Outside the courthouse, the late afternoon's pale sunshine dimmed as clouds gathered. Rowan carried Piper down the steps, Elena at her side. A local reporter, Claire Reynolds from the Helena Tribune, approached with a digital recorder. "Ms. Howard, what are your plans now that custody has been awarded to you?" Rowan paused. She glanced at Piper, then spoke. "My priority is Piper, her safety, her well-being. We're settling into a new apartment in Ironwood. I'll continue my work with St. Jude Regional's mobile clinic as a local liaison. As for Mr. Palmer, I hope he uses this time to seek counseling and become the father Piper deserves. And I trust the court's decision will ensure our daughter's best interests come first." At Rowan's words, Elena slipped an arm around her. Beckett appeared behind them, lips pressed tight, but said nothing. His father, John Palmer, watched from across the sidewalk, face inscrutable, but a single nod acknowledged Rowan's resolve. Eloise, standing a half-block away, wrapped in her own scarf, glared at Rowan as though she alone could condemn her choice. As they walked away, the courthouse steps rang with a final echo that carried one immense truth. Rowan would no longer be defined by Beckett's betrayal. Piper's soft coos were a promise of new beginnings, a reminder that in legal halls where evidence and testimony collided, a mother's love and protective instinct would always stand victorious. The strains of late spring weather carried an uneasy warmth over Ironwood, Montana, as the days grew longer. By midsummer, weeks had passed since the court's verdict granted Rowan sole custody of Piper. Her new apartment, a modest two-bedroom near the edge of town, was just large enough for her small family. A nursery painted pale mint, a cozy living area, and a simple kitchen where she baked oatmeal cookies every Sunday. Piper's laughter had become a common soundtrack, soft, joyful, and wholly present. Yet a quiet tension lingered beneath the surface of Ironwood's wooded calm. Beckett Palmer had not returned to his family home. Instead, he and Sloane Rivers had decamped to a rambling rental cabin south of Helena, ostensibly to start fresh. Rumors swirled in the grocery aisles and at Sunday church services. Some said they were finally renovating the old Palmer ranch. Others whispered about Sloane's sudden absence from the insurance office. But no one saw them after the courthouse hearing. On a bright Tuesday morning in mid-July, the town's motorcycles and pickups roared with unexpected urgency. A two-vehicle accident on Interstate 90, westbound, near Homestake Pass. A silver Lexus SUV, a very familiar license plate, had collided head-on with a black sports coupe. Both vehicles burst into flames. The local dispatcher's radio crackled with frantic calls. To EMS.
Units en route.
Major injuries reported. Possible fatalities. At Rowan's doorstep, her phone rang exactly at 9:13 a.m. The caller ID read, Lewis County Dispatch. She answered, heart-thudding, half expecting something awful. On the line was Sheriff Deputy Carl Stockton, his voice measured but grave. Ms. Howard, I'm sorry to inform you that your ex-husband, Elliot Palmer, and his companion, Ms. Sloane Rivers, were involved in a fatal collision on Interstate 90 early this morning. Rowan's breath caught. She clutched the cordless phone as though it might slip through her fingers. Piper, halfway through an afternoon nap, stirred in her crib, her tiny fists clutching at the blanket. Rowan felt an icy ache. They're both dead, she asked, voice barely a whisper. Yes, ma'am, Deputy Stockton replied. The accident occurred at approximately 5:47 a.m. Investigators believe they lost control on a patch of black ice. Both were pronounced dead at the scene. A heavy silence followed. Rowan's eyes blurred. She closed her hand over her heart. Thank you, I'll. She hung up and rose from the love seat, moving toward Piper's room, tears already forming at the corners of her eyes. By mid-afternoon, news of Beckett and Sloane's deaths had spread through Ironwood like wildfire. A pall settled over the small town. The grocery cashier's eyes were somber. The librarian spoke in hushed tones. And at the community center, neighbors placed sunflowers and small bouquets on a roadside cross near the scene. Foxgloves and daisies now bowed in the summer breeze, a memorial to a crash that had ripped two lives apart. Rowan sat on her twin-sized bed, rocking Piper gently. Mama has to go out for a moment. Okay, baby. She lifted Piper from the crib, keeping a hand pressed protectively at her back. In her purse was a small stack of photocopied newspaper clippings, the accident report, Beckett's obituary, and a brief mention of Sloane's role at Ironwood Branch. Rowan needed a moment to process what had happened, even though she'd never wished them harm. Late that afternoon, she walked toward the small memorial at the intersection of Mountain View Drive and 88th Avenue. The scene was quiet, a single wooden cross, now adorned with fresh wildflowers tied by neighbors. A dangling ribbon reading, Love and Remembrance. Just beyond, the pine-lined highway dipped into a shaded curve, a stretch notorious for quick freezes in summer mornings. Rowan knelt before the cross and laid Piper's favorite baby blanket atop a small stack of wild daisies. Tears welled in her eyes as she ran her fingers over the pale, mint embroidery. She pictured Beckett, once so full of promise, and felt a cold grief that was neither joy nor relief, but something far more bittersweet. Piper cooed in her arms, unaware of the world's pain. Rowan kissed her daughter's forehead, drawing comfort from the soft rise and fall of her breath. In that hush beside the memorial, time seemed to expand and contract. Rowan traced Beckett's name on the weathered wood. Elliot Palmer, beloved son and father, 1985 to 2025. Underneath, someone had added Sloane's name. Sloane Rivers, 1988 to 2025. Love, loyalty, and betrayal had all come to rest here. Back home, the front door opened to the familiar warmth of her apartment. Piper's crib was vacant for nap time. The pale mint walls glowed in soft dispersion from the nursery lamp. Rowan switched on Becky's playlist, a selection of gentle classical pieces she created for Piper's lullabies, but the music felt hollow. She pulled a small box from her kitchen cabinet. The only remaining item they'd never fought over, Rowan's wedding band. She slipped it on a delicate silver chain and hung it over a thumbtack beside Piper's framed ultrasound photo. It gleamed there, a memory of innocence, a testament to what had been, and what could never be again. That evening, Eloise Palmer quietly approached Rowan's apartment door. The knuckles on her right hand trembled as she raised them to tap. When Rowan opened the door, Eloise stood rigid, eyes brimming with unspilled tears. "Well, Rowena," she said, voice husky. "I came to." Rowan closed the door gently on her own coffee mug, pouring peppermint tea into both of their cups. She led Eloise to the small kitchen table and sat, gesturing for her to join. Piper sat in her high chair at Rowan's side, gurgling in her bib. Eloise's eyes darted to Piper, then back to Rowan. I wanted to apologize." Her voice cracked. "I blamed you for everything that went wrong. I thought you were the villain. But when I heard about the accident..." Rowan rested a hand on her daughter's high chair tray. "I didn't want anyone else to get hurt." Eloise exhaled. "I'm sorry for everything I said. Beckett, he was my only son. I tried to protect him, but I only pushed everyone away." She wiped her eyes. "I don't know how to be here without him." Rowan reached across the table, placing a gentle hand on Eloise's. "You have Piper now. And me. We're all you have left." Eloise's lips trembled as she nodded. "I can't bring them back. I have nothing against you anymore. I see how strong you've been, raising Piper." Rowan offered a small smile. "It's been hard, but Piper makes it worth it." She gestured toward her baby, who waved a sticky hand toward the tea. "I want you to be in her life, Eloise, if you want that." For the first time in months, Eloise's posture softened. She looked at Piper, who returned her gaze with wide, curious eyes. How can I help?" Rowan's heart warmed. "Maybe just visit now and then. Read the quilting patterns you've been knitting. Tell Piper about her father, when she's older, so she'll remember him, too." Eloise nodded, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "I'd like that." By late summer, Ironwood had softened from harsh snow to sweet green meadows. Rowan's car, now in her name, still carried Piper between daycare and her office at St. Jude's, where Rowan resumed her role as community liaison. Her afternoons passed in structured calm, drafting health, education materials, consulting with rural mothers about immunizations, and every Thursday at 3:30, coordinating a Piper's and P's playgroup in the community center's sunny multipurpose room. The first Piper's and P's session brought 4 wide-eyed toddlers and their mothers. Rowan watched Piper take tentative steps across a foam mat, clinging to blocks as though they were stepping stones toward independence. A small circle of children chorused in delight. Iced lemonade and carrot sticks rested on a child-sized table. Rowan greeted each mother with a genuine smile, her earlier anxieties eased by the simple fellowship of shared parenting. Outside, Ironwood's pines whispered in the gentle breeze. In her heart, Rowan felt a quiet closure. The tragic end of Beckett and Sloane had come too soon, but it had also released her from the fractures of betrayal. Piper would grow up knowing the warmth of 2 caring homes, beside her mother and beside her grandmother, Eloise, despite all that had been lost. That evening, as Rowan laid Piper in her crib, she tucked the pastel, pink blanket chin high planting a soft kiss on her daughter's forehead. The nursery walls, once painted in mint, now gleamed with the evening's glow from a small lamp shaped like a crescent moon. She switched on the white noise machine, a gentle waterfall hum, and Piper closed her eyes, drifting to sleep. Rowan stood at the door, watching her daughter sleep peacefully, her rise and fall steady, unmarred by the storms of the past. She leaned gently against the doorframe, hands clasped. For the first time since everything fell apart, she felt at home in the silence. Outside, the last flickers of daylight retreated behind Ironwood's pine-covered hills. The stars blinked awake one by one, silent witnesses to a story of love, betrayal, tragedy, and ultimately, resilience. Rowan exhaled, letting go of the sorrow that had once bound her. She turned and quietly closed the door, leaving behind only the soft, rhythmic lullaby of a child at rest, and stepping into the gentle promise of a new dawn. And that brings us to the end of today's story on TrueStory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.